And good morning. Today is Wednesday, August the 19th, and this is Urban Talk Radio 103.5 FM WNHHLP, where you will hear conversation, information, education, inspiration, motivation from the American urban perspective. I'm your host, Shafiq Abdussabur, and the day on Urban Talk Radio, I'll be doing a solo show actually today, which I haven't done in a very long time. If you want to join this conversation, you can join this conversation on Facebook at Bold Minds and Twitter at Bold Minds, or you can stream this show live on your smartphone by logging on to newhavenindependent.org. And Harry, do we have a call-in? Do we have a call-in line for this?
No, we don't have a call-in line. We have a call-in number for
the Zoom.
The Zoom, yeah.
Okay, all right. So we have to figure. All right. Well, we'll as time goes on, we will.
But any comments they make on the Facebook page, I will, let you know.
Okay. All right. That's good. So a lot of things going on. Seems like a whole lot of things going on right now, and just the news in the world in New Haven. As many of you know, this is a Connecticut broadcasting, so we cover pretty much New Haven County, I believe, and a couple other parts of Connecticut. And one thing that seems to be a theme that's running through the entire nation that I'm picking up on is an increase of violence, gun violence, particularly in the African American communities nationwide. Most recently, it was, I believe, yesterday in New York, there was a series of shootings. Like in the last 48 hours, New York had, they said they had one person killed, several others injured, 4 different shootings. That was in New York. And overnight, it says 5 more people wounded overnight in New York, bringing the total weekend shootings in New York City to 51 shootings. News reported that shootings in New York City are up 82% from last year. Now, the interesting thing is, New York, unlike Connecticut, who just passed the bill regarding police accountability, I just call it police accountability bill. New York does not have such a bill that has been passed, but shootings are extraordinarily high, higher than in the past, obviously. And this trend appears to continue throughout many of the major cities in the United States. Chicago, for instance, which is, always known, at least in my numbers, have always known Chicago to have a high number of shootings. But one thing that is happening in a trend in Chicago is many more children are being shot. And in fact, it seems that many more children are being shot in urban communities across the United States. Chicago Times reported 15 people shot, 1 killed, and that was on Tuesday. And, the mayor has called out for these things, that they need to do more, the police need to do more, the community needs to do more. There seems to be a debate that goes back and forth about what the African American community needs to do for itself, and the African American community has a debate about exactly what government and others need to do to help them address this issue. So we're in a grim place right now. I mean, there is certainly been a lot of outrage since the George Floyd incident. And for, as many people have said, if you just see all of this to be a result of George Floyd, then you really don't understand what's going on. So this is, not something that, in terms of the consciousness, I guess you would call it the Black consciousness that is out there within the African American community around Black Lives Matter, around issues around police reform. These have been things that I believe that Black people have been trying to address for a very long time. I know that my mother was a member of the Black Panthers, and that was back in the late 60s. And I can remember growing up of her going to marches at the police station, protesting because a Black man had got pulled over by the police, arrested, and the next day they found him hung in his cell. That was something that was very trendy back in the late 60s and the early 70s, that Black men who would get arrested by the police would mysteriously find themselves dead, or would they be mysteriously found dead, hung in a prison cell, and then you would have this outpouring of protest. Was not nothing on the level of what we see now, of 1,000 people. Often would be something around 50 to 60 people on the steps of a police station, or wherever this may have occurred. So the concept of people dying at the hands of law enforcement and Black people being uncomfortable with that is not a new thing. It's an ongoing thing. And so when people understand that, then you can understand that if this is something that your grandmother and grandfather dealt with and told your mother and father, i.e., gave them the talk, and then your parents grew up under this same condition, and then your parents finally had to give you the talk, and so they're giving you the talk, which is me, let's just say me, the talk at my age at 53, and then I believe that, hey, this is probably or should be getting better at this point. I should not have to give that talk to my children, and now I'm giving that talk to my children. My children are in their 20s, so I'm giving that talk, or have to give that talk to my children, and now it appears that my children will be giving that talk to their children. So as this thing continues on throughout the generation, some people call it generational trauma, some people call it systemic racism in terms of generations, some people call it a product of slavery. We can call it a whole lot of different things. But certainly, there has been some markers that have come about with where we are pretty much as a country, with police and the African American community, as it relates to, we can call it the relationship between police and the African American community. There have been some significant markers that have taken place over, we can say, the last 10 years. We know that there's those three incidents that I refer to. We've called it in law enforcement the post Mike Brown era. Now we're calling this kind of the George Floyd era. But we can go back to the Eric Gardner incident, and what makes these the Eric Gardner, the Mike Brown, the George Floyd, and even we can go back to Rodney King, that people have complained about issues with the police, or whatever you want to call it, issues, problems, discrimination, brutality, whatever you want to put a name on it to call it. People have complained about these things in the past and said, hey, listen, these things are a problem. I'm being mistreated, or I'm being mishandled, not by all police, but maybe this particular incident, I was mishandled or I was mistreated. What are we doing about it? And it wasn't really until March 3rd of 1991, when Rodney King was attempted to be arrested by LA police officers during a traffic stop. And this was all caught on camera. Back then, there was people had a guy was videotaping it with a VHS, and he caught it on his VHS recorder. And then this video now became really like a worldwide video. I mean, this is like everybody knows Rodney King, no matter where you go. I mean, even people make jokes about it. Don't make me Rodney King you, or I got Rodney King. You know, even when Rodney King, they brought him out after all of the violence broke out and things started going crazy. They had Rodney King come out and say to everybody, "Why can't we all just get along?" And in fact, the phrase of "Can't we all just get?" I think it was "Can't we all just get along?" And the fact that it was so significant, and it was Rodney King in 2012, an Australian musician, Guy Sebastian, actually made a song based on Rodney King's statement. So this is like a monumental moment in American law enforcement. I don't think at any time in American law enforcement prior to that time had there ever been any coverage, any video, any visual record of police misconduct as related to African American community. Then, you know, as time goes on, we get hit with the July 2014 of Eric Gardner, where Eric is being stopped by police officers for selling loosies. And if people don't understand, the actual selling of a loosie is actually not even a state violation. It's actually a federal law violation. The cigarettes, they actually get their labels from the Food and Drug Administration, and the states actually just collect the taxes. And so it's actually like it falls under a federal regulatory crime, and it's a low-level federal regulatory crime. And it also falls under the state. And in the state, the thing that the state is concerned about with a loosie is that every pack of cigarettes, however many cigarettes in a pack, I don't smoke, so I don't know. But let's just say in a pack of cigarettes, there are 50 cigarettes. And let's just say a pack of cigarettes of Newports cost on retail $5. And then the state puts a $3 tax seal on it, which is supposed to be over that carton of cigarettes. So when you break the carton and break the seal on it proves that you, as the retail person, has paid the taxes, right? It's a legitimate. So if you go buy cartons of cigarettes from a reserve, you know, I'm sorry, Mashantucket or some of these other places where the indigenous people have their reserves, I'm being told there's 20 in a pack. Okay, excellent. They're not going to have a seal because those reservations don't they don't fall in that guideline because it's a sovereign land. So it's not under federal control. But if you go to Virginia and you buy it from distributor in Virginia, it's going to have the seal on it. So here's the point. The point is it's a regulatory issue. It's not selling loosie is not a police issue. The only thing that police play a role in enforcement around a loosie in terms of the Eric Gardner piece would have actually been the loitering piece, right? So, hey, dude, you are loitering. You are standing out in front of this store peddling cigarettes, and we don't need you out here. But in fact, they actually approached him on selling these cigarettes without a tax stamp. Police are not tax collectors. I've been saying this now, having myself been retired now for roughly, I think, 3 years. And, you know, I was a commander, a district commander. You know, I went into the corner stores with the labor department, with the tax people from the tax office, with people from different components of the state regulatory to put pressure on the corner stores that were selling loosies and crack pipes. And I call them crack setups. They selling rose pipes, the blow pipes with the rose in it, little pieces of copper, the bags where the young people or people can bag up drugs for resale. And, these are all items that you always find in any corner store in any African-American, heavily populated, poor community. And shame on, these people that run these stores, own them and run them and operate, and they know exactly what they're doing, right? So, it was a problem, same kind of situation. It results in people hanging out in front of the store all day, which often kind of harbors or breeds an area where somebody's going to get into a confrontation. Hey, I can, you meet up with somebody you had a beef with. Somebody's out there then figuring out, hey, this is a good idea. I got a lot of people coming through here. Hey, this is a good spot to maybe set up a new drug operation, or, just the normal. Maybe somebody's got a lot of things on their mind. It's just not a good environment in front of a corner store in a very depressed community. Is not a place where you want a lot of people constantly gathering when the store itself is involved in legal operation of different things. So the officers, really what they should have did is they should have been putting the pressure on the store and looking at the rest of the environment. But nevertheless, they approached Eric Gardner July 17th. He's selling loosies. And then from there, in the attempt of the arrest, he was choked. And then subsequently of being put in this chokehold in 2014, he's put in a legitimate chokehold. You can actually see, when I say legitimate, I don't mean they had a right to put him in a chokehold. What I'm saying is, some people say the cops choke a person, or they attempted to put them. Now they put him in like a full Nelson, the wrestling full Nelson chokehold, right? You're not getting out of that. And then he was a big dude, and the way they had him, he wasn't getting out of that for Lucy's. For a Lucy cigarette, because it didn't have a tax stamp. That was 2017. But what was really interesting about 2017 was not the Eric Gardner incident, because Eric Gardner happened on July 17th. But we didn't really hear about Eric Gardner until actually around August the 17th. It was like around August, 10th, 11th, 12th, that we actually started hearing about Eric Gardner. And it was like, Eric Gardner, when was that? Because we had heard about Mike Brown. And that was August 9th of 2014, when Mike Brown, 18-year-old black male, was fatally shot by a white police officer, Darren Wilson, in Ferguson, Missouri. So everybody's familiar with the Mike Brown shooting. I don't think anybody in the world, to be honest with you, that speaks English or keeps up with social media, you cannot not know about this incident where this young man, there's a discrepancy that police officer tried to stop him, and while trying to stop him, the officer approached Brown, grabbing him by the neck through his car window, and apparently there was a confrontation back and forth. The officer says that Brown tried to grab him and pull him through the car window, and he got out and shot him. There's a whole bunch of different stories. Bottom line is, here's the story. The story is, it's a pedestrian stop. That's what I call these. They're pedestrian stops. You are walking down the street as a pedestrian. The officer has a suspicion that you're a suspicious person. Officer needs to stop you, find out what's going on with you. You got a gun? What's up with you? You've been selling drugs? What's up with you? I need to talk to you. I need to check your ID. Whatever the case is, it's a pedestrian stop, right? And it's very clear that Mike Brown lived in what looked like to be some type of apartment complex or housing complex or affordable housing complex, which often these are complexes that are heavily policed by police. And as a result of this, Mike Brown is shot. I think that what the outrage in the community was, and seemed like around the world, was not so much that he got shot, but the fact that after he did get shot, his body laid out there on the ground for, some say, 8 hours, right? Uncovered. Why they put up this huge crime scene tape component, almost as to send a message to the community to say, hey, listen, yeah, we shot him. And, this is what we do. And the next time could be one of you. And we're just going to let y'all kind of land based on this for a minute. And perception is everything. And, the days that follow, protesters said that, witnesses said, hey, listen, he had his hands up when he got shot. And there's all types of different perspectives on this. There was no body camera at the time. So there was no footage, really, no body camera footage. Most of the footage of this incident is when Mike Brown is laying on the ground, shot. He's dead, or appears to be dead, or bleeding, or something to that degree. And that's August 9th. And then from there, the unrest begins. We have roughly, I believe it was like 150 days of straight protesting. The incident the action that followed this incident in Ferguson wind up being one of the largest continuous, they say it was one of the largest continuous protests that they could, one of the largest, not the largest, but one of the largest continuous protests in modern day history. They protested every single day, up until the time of the release of the investigation, when it came to its conclusion. And then we know what happened at the end of the result of the investigation. Wilson was cleared, and as a result of being cleared, so therefore he was not indicted. The father of Mike Brown, or the stepfather of Mike Brown, was outraged. They were waiting for the decision to come out. The officials in that city waited to release it late night, around 8 o'clock, for whatever reason they did. Maybe they thought that by doing so, the people would be like sleep or something. And when they released it, all the people was downtown. They got outraged, and then the stepfather got up on top of the car, upset, and told everybody to burn the city down. And they burnt the city down. And that was, I believe, I think that it was around March that they settled that. I'm sorry, it was November. It's actually November. It was November the 24th. So we knew everything that happened after November 24th in law enforcement to be, we called that the Mike Brown era. That was the Mike Brown era. So you had Mike Brown era, which also included Eric Garner. And as a result of that, this is where we started to see large, wide-scale protests in the United States around police, really surging up. And then in between that, there were a whole matrix of other shootings that, I don't want to spend too much time talking about those. But it was a whole matrix. The Walker shooting in South Carolina, which was actually caught on video. Another one in Ohio, where deputy shot a guy and he said, I can't breathe. And he was like, he shot him during an incident of a warrant check. So the Laquan McDaniel shooting that was in Chicago, where the lieutenant claimed that Laquan McDaniel assaulted his car tire. He stabbed the tire of the car, assaulted the car tire. They kind of chased him down, shot at him 16 times, bullets ricocheting off the ground, and you can see him as he was on the ground. So all of these become perception components to how police are handling themselves and handling issues around the African American community. Then we fast forward to May of this year, and It's May 25th. It's 2020. It is a pandemic. We are roughly at that point, roughly around March, April, May, probably 12 weeks to 10 weeks into shutdown of a pandemic in the United States of America. Everybody and their mama pretty much owns a smartphone or some type of digital media platform where they can watch a video or watch the news. And now the news is really clips and clips of various videos. And we see, this officer, uh, uh, Derek Chauvin, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, arresting this black man with his knee on his neck, his hand in his pocket, which was something that was very notable to me when I looked at it. I think my wife might even showed it to me. And I looked at it, and as I looked at the video to examine it, I'm like, why is he sitting there with his knee on his neck, but his hand is in his pocket? And there's two reasons for that. It's two reasons why something like that happens. Hands in the pocket with the knee on his neck is to do either torque. He's torquing the pressure of his knee. He's adjusting his body weight in a way where it doesn't look like he's putting a lot of effort in it. Like, oh, I'm only got my knee on his neck. But in fact, by doing that, he can actually increase the pressure on his neck because it actually torques the pressure of the knee in that position. And it's a tactic. It's a dirty tactic. I mean, and anybody that in law enforcement or former in law enforcement that would disagree with me, then you're lying. But it's a dirty tactic. The other part of it is not only is he using it as an opportunity to torque up the pressure on his neck, it also kind of sends a message. Again, it reminds me a lot of the Mike Brown incident of, okay, this is how we do things, and this is a message for all of you onlookers. The interesting caption that they have about this incident really shows only like the end of the police car, the back of the police car, George Floyd's upper body, like from his shoulders up, and then the officer. What is often not caught in the entire scope of this is the entire outlay of what was going on. All the people that were watching, right? There's a lot of people out there watching this thing. It was not just three officers out there doing an arrest. This was like a display. So you have to put that in the context of what people are watching, what people are looking at. We now know that there's additional body footage that shows there's what appears to be a white skinned female who identifies herself as a firefighter who goes over there, and they basically just dismiss her. It's like, get back on the sidewalk, mind your business. We will lock you up. You going to, and here's the thing. What is it over? It's over a counterfeit bill. So what is the difference between a counterfeit bill, or the similarities with a counterfeit bill, and the Eric Gardner incident? So Eric Gardner, again, Lucy cigarettes. This is a tax issue. This is a federal crime, and it's a state crime. It's a tax issue. Selling individual Lucy's it's got nothing to do with municipal enforcement. Like all the things that cops have to worry about, stopping somebody on the street because they're selling a Lucy. Trust me, if you're a real cop in an urban community, messing with somebody for a Lucy is it's beyond petty. It's like seriously, it's like you have the ability to stop a car because it appears to have the tires are bad, they're improper tires because the tread is worn down. So you stop the car, you ask for license, registration, insurance, and then you take out a quarter and go and start sticking it into the tire treads to see which tire tread is low. Who does that? If you're doing that and you're a police officer, you should go get another job, right? So nobody does that. So here you got this incident with the George Floyd, and you got this officer stopping him, apprehending him on the allegation of a counterfeit bill. So why is this like not necessary to do? Because normally in almost every city, When somebody passes a counterfeit bill, officers notified. Officers notified on a counterfeit bill. Officer shows up. Often by that time, the person is actually gone. Um, when the person is gone, you just take their information, you seize the counterfeit bill, you take it back, normally to your department, log it into evidence with a case number and a report, and then you contact the Secret Service, and then the Secret Service takes it from there. If you're a lucky cop, the Secret Service might even contact you and say, hey, Officer Jones, great job on that counterfeit bill. You know, we've been working a case on a counterfeit ring out of wherever. And, you know, because you retrieve this counterfeit bill, this is going to really help make our case. And when we get ready to do some additional stuff, we're going to include you. Or maybe when they solve their big case, they send a really nice letter back to your department saying Officer Jones was a great guy. He assisted us in this thing and he should get this award. That's it. No one's in a foot chase because somebody just passed a $20 Monopoly bill. No one gets in the foot chase for that. No one's putting nobody in a chokehold, smashing their head, holding them at gunpoint because they passed a counterfeit. This ain't TV. That's that TV stuff. There's like, oh my God, they have a $100,000 in counterfeit bills. You call the Secret Service. That's what they do. The Security and Exchange Commission and all that's a federal issue. That is not a municipal issue. So here we go. May 25th, 2020, and we got a knee on the dude's neck with a hand in the pocket, twerking up the weight on the leg to put extra pressure on him to show how effortless this is for me, you know, in this case as an officer, to do this thing to this man, and the entire world explodes. That's exactly what happens. The entire world explodes. And now you have people that want to totally defund police departments. You have people that are calling for immediate arrest of officers. You got people that are calling for, you know, things that happen in a very aggressive fashion around law enforcement. You have law enforcement officials, the officials, not the rank and files. The officials are scrambling, running around alongside of elected officials, of municipalities, mayors and city town people and first selectmen and things of this nature. And they're trying to figure this thing out to try to get their hands around what do we do. The public is asking, they're demanding, they're requesting these type of things. And then now we have, with all of this happening, an additional component unfolding, which is a rapid surge of gun violence in the African American communities. So African American communities right now are under one of the most significant, if you would call it a life strain. Life strain meaning that majority of people are dying from COVID in the United States are African American men, and the next wave of it is, in terms of wave means the next classification, African American men men are the highest, Black and brown people, and then someone may say, well, it's people with freaking whatever. It's still African American men. The number is still high. African American men are the highest on the threshold dying from COVID. And then you have, on top of that, then you have African American men are the top on the spectrum that die at the hands of police when these confrontational conditions erupt. And then there's Black and brown people that die at the hand of police when these confrontations between police and the community. And then now on top of that, we have what has been constant in America, at least since the 90s, roughly around the 90s, which has been gun violence and African American being high on the spectrum, African American men high on the spectrum for gun violent related deaths and non-fatal shootings, which, by the way, the non-fatal shootings often result in somebody having an injury for life. something wrong where they can't really walk the way they normally did, meaning that you might be able to walk, but you're walking with a limp, so you can't run, which means that you won't be able to exercise at the level that you potentially should be, which down the road could increase other health issues such as diabetes and such. People who are paralyzed. We see a lot of young dudes get shot. Somebody thinks they're dead, and nobody sees them for a while, and then they resurface 5 years later in a wheelchair, and people are like, "Wow, that's like I didn't know. I thought he was dead." Like, nah, he's been recovering like in a wheelchair. Now he's paralyzed. So we have this almost like this assault of Black men in many cases by the environment. Now, I did I think an NPR talk, and then somebody got really upset with me. One of the PhD professors up there when I said black on black crime, and they were like, "It's not black on black crime. I'm being something. I don't know what the term is, but they were like, when Black people kill other Black people, it's not black on black crime. It's proximity crime. It's listen, call it whatever the hell you want to call it. Bottom line is, if I live in an African American community and I'm a Black male, and I'm concerned that when I go outside, I might get shot by another Black male, that's a Black person committing crime on another Black person. We can play the semantics of it and do the wordplay, but the numbers is the numbers, and the numbers are most African Americans that are shot and killed, particularly African American men, roughly around 89% of them are shot by other African American men, and about 79% of them are shot by somebody that they know. Okay, so this is not a stranger crime. This is not, George Brown got shot by Daquan Jones, and Daquan Jones didn't know George Brown. No, they probably grew up in the same neighborhood. They probably know each other by somehow, or dated the same girl, or whatever the case might be. Bottom line is, Black people are dying in America. Black people have one of their worst relationships with the police that I think in the history of America. This is the worst ever relationship between Black people and the police. The worst ever. I mean, listen, let's do a challenge. It's the worst ever. It's the worst ever, and it's even in the other part of it about it that is so egregious, because there does not appear to be a silver lining. Now, we live in America where everybody's not Black, right? There's white people in America, other cultures. And we know that often, sometimes in white cultures, there's this concept of a silver lining. That's not really something in the Black community. Doesn't talk about silver linings, because the Black community always seems to be like in a constant state of struggle. That's just real. Black people, no matter how much money we make, no matter how much education we get, we recognize that there's always a struggle, because we struggle, even if you're successful and you make a lot of money, you've struggled to make that money, and then you're struggling to maintain it. If you got an education, you got a PhD, you struggled to get that PhD, and now you're going to struggle even more to qualify yourself with the credentials you have. I have a PhD. Okay. And who are you? You are I have the PhD. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, yeah, I know you're sorry. So it's always a struggle for us. So this, as they say, the struggle continues. So the African American community doesn't always play up this concept of, well, there'll be a silver lining. Once we get through this year, things should get better. And I just take it back. If we go back to the Rodney King incident, Rodney King was in 91, right? And then we've got two major incidents in 2014 between Mike Brown and Eric Garner. And then now we come to this era and we have the George Floyd. And then we just don't have the George Floyd. I mean, we mentioned the George Floyd and the Eric, but there's so many more. I mean, there's so many more that can be listed that the news may not cover. Maybe it's not their job to cover, right? The politicians are not going to remember. Maybe it's not their job to remember. But one thing that can be said is that the African American community, Black people in the United States, who came here by way of slavery, uh, not of their own accord, who were not classified as humans. They were classified as animals. So we have to really remember that. Sometimes people don't want to have that conversation. It's like, oh man, here you go with the race card. No, I'm going with the history card. The history card is black people were born here as slaves. They were considered to be cattle. They did not have the ability to vote. They did not have the ability to even be considered to have human rights. Because if you're a cattle, you don't have. We eat cattle in America, right? We have eaten cows in America since the beginning of America. We not one time ever went to a cow and said, hey, do you want to vote Democrat or Republican? We eat cows. We eat a cheeseburger. When we eat that cheeseburger, we don't ask that cheeseburger, like, how you feeling? We drink the cow's milk. Cows are an animal. They do not, we do not consider them human. We stun them in the head. Then we open up a factory and gut them. That's how you treat cattle, because cattle is considered an animal. We have lions and tigers and bears. We have them in zoos. We consider them animals. We put them on display. We do not have a zoo where we have people in cages, where we go by and look at them on display, which is probably why there's such outrage around the immigration policies under the Trump administration, where they show people in cages, because that is indicative of somebody saying, oh my God, that's what we do with animals. Okay, so that's modern day. So now let's play it back to the initial slavery time when black people were brought here under not the conditions. I don't even want to talk about the condition right now. I want to talk about the concept of how they were brought here. So if you're brought here under that concept, and then we're trying to evolve away from that, then we need to understand why these incidents between the police and community become such shock points in our American history. Shock points. And I think that, unfortunately, we're going to turn back the history tables of this era, and we're going to see our country having had two pandemics going at the same time, maybe even three, or a pandemic broken into three spots. And somebody says, that, made something up already. You're talking about a pandemic. A pandemic is a global thing. How you going to make this, American gun violence in the African American community? That ain't a pandemic, and you want to talk about the relationship between police and the black community and the things that have going on. That's not a pandemic. Fine. Then it's an epidemic, and it's an epidemic that has been going on so long that somebody could almost categorize it as an endemic, because there seems to be, like COVID, no vaccine, no social, economic, educational vaccine for Black people in America around being able to not falling victim to these conditions, to the condition of police misconduct in the small silos as it exists, as Black people falling victim to gun violence, which is a bigger, it's a bigger net, right? It's a bigger net. In fact, it was the Brady Foundation and some other research that I was able to come across, where an African American boy, that it showed that a Black man's safety does not necessarily increase if they move to the suburbs or if they're in a suburban community. Like the homicide rate, the death chance rate of that Black male from gun violence still remains at the same level, which is like really, it's like an insane concept that, you could move your kid or you can move your family into a suburban neighborhood and your kid still could manage to get shot because if your child goes back into an environment where I guess you could say all of the elements are there, then they're increased risk of being a victim. I used to always say, if you put 100 kids in a room and you put one person in that room with them of the 100 kids that have a gun, how many children are at risk? 100, including the kid that has the gun. It's 100 kids that are at risk. So it's not about a numbers game of how many guns people have, and it's a numbers game of the proximity of that gun to the people in that environment and the conduct and the behavior and the coping skills and all these other things. So that's part two. So the part one of this, what I will call it endemic, is the actual issue of African Americans and the violent engagements between African Americans and police, and African Americans and violent engagements between African American and society as it relates to each other, as it relates to interpersonal conflict that results in violent encounters with each other. And then we have one could assume to actually be the third piece of this, which seems that we can't somehow escape and get past, which is what I have came up with. I believe it was in 2000, probably was in like 2014. The criminalization of Black skin, the concept that if I'm Black and for whatever reason I'm shot and killed by the police, or I die at the hands of the police and I'm unarmed, then I must have a record, and we must go and try to figure out, well, what was my record? I was a ex-offender. I previously incarcerated. I had previous run-ins with the police. These particular things, and then of course, if I am shot and killed by another Black man in my community, I still don't get a pass on my background either. I mean, because now the news says, well, this was an isolated incident, and in this isolated incident, we find that this young man was involved in crime. So we have a lot of issues that we have to address in our society. Next week on Urban Talk Radio, I'm going to have a community activist and somebody who's really close to this issue to actually come on and talk about this. In fact, I talked to him last night, and his perspective was that some of the violence now that we see in the African American community in relations to what we call headshots are something that's actually being perpetrated by some of the music that's out there in rap culture. And his brother is actually a nationwide rap artist and well known. I may try to get him on later on, but next week on Urban Talk Radio at 11, you can tune in, and we're going to pick back up on this conversation because it's very powerful, and it's something that we can't ignore, and it's something that we can't expect to turn on another radio show that this issue is not their priority and expect them to talk about it. So if you're just joining us today on Urban Talk Radio, I'm your host, Shafiq Abdussabur, and we've been just talking about the state of police and African American relations and violence in America and where we are in this era. If you missed any part of this show, you can log on to newhavenindependent.org and you can listen to the podcast. We look for you to tune in every Wednesday at 11 o'clock, Zoom, and hope you enjoy your day. Thank you for listening.